everybody. It is Tapping with TT, and I am your host, TT Torrez, and I have some special guests here to talk about the presidential election. It's my good brother, Kevin Liles.
What it do?
I would say from 300 Entertainment, but you just resigned, but we'll get into that later.
Yeah, we do that. I'm still there until January. So.
Okay, all right. We'll talk about that in a few minutes. And we have the Lieutenant Governor of New York, Antonio Delgado. How are you today?
I'm very well. Good to be here. Thanks for having me.
Welcome to the show.
Absolutely. Thanks.
So let's just dive right into it. Let's talk about the presidential election. We are on the countdown. We are on the clock. And as you guys can see, I wore my...
Nice.
I voted early because here in New York, you can vote early through November 3rd.
Correct.
And, of course, Election Day is on November 5th, guys, okay? So make sure you guys get out there, exercise your right to vote. But it was important for you guys to stop by the show today to discuss the voting process. Why?
Well, first and foremost, I think it's important for listeners to understand that freedom is participation in power. And if you want to exercise your freedom, you have to engage with your power. And the most critical way to do that is through the power of the vote. We can never forget that there were a lot of folks that came before us that fought and sacrificed an awful lot and shed blood for the opportunity to be heard. And we're living in a time right now where the choice is pretty clear in terms of one vision that wants to pull us back to a time where those rights weren't really afforded equally.
Yeah.
And another vision that says, no, let's move forward here with Harris and make sure that we are investing in everybody, supporting everybody, providing equal protection under the law to everybody, and understand that nobody is above the law. And I think that is what we, as people of color in particular, should always be thinking about when it comes to democracy and our legacy in this space. So, yes, vote with an understanding of from whence we've come and where we want to go.
Yeah. So Kevin, why did you decide to jump into, I would say, the campaign trail? You've always been political.
I'm 40 years in, so I tell you, my 18th birthday, I look at it as one of the greatest moments in my life that I got the opportunity to actually cast a vote because I lived through seeing the scars and the wounds from my grandparents not having, but working the best, and my parents just working hard every single day. And I always say I like it's personal to me, but when it comes to the choices that I have to make right now, everybody's so concerned about not only the presidential election, but there's a whole ballot box of things that, I'm fighting courts now for criminalization of lyrics. I'm going through situations where people are actually putting us, attacking our culture in a way that I just not on my watch. I lived through Too Loud Crew, I lived through NWA, I lived through all that stuff, and to come here to see dealing with it 50 years later of these issues that we're having. So it's personal to me, but the policy that I like of Kamala's the first person to put a plan together for us. You know what I mean? I made a couple of thousand multimillionaires out there, and if they had that tax credit, they had that extra $20,000, if the $50,000, like if they had these things back then, we probably would have hundreds and hundreds more. So her agenda for black men, her agenda for our people, and it's the power of a black woman. You know what I mean? For all the presidencies, it took us 44 to get one black. Now we have the opportunity to elect a woman, and she said, I have a male agenda. First time in the history of politics. So that's why her policy is why I'm with Kamala.
Let's talk about those policies, because there is this notion that she is struggling with black men, which I don't believe.
You shouldn't.
I do not believe that, and here's why I don't believe that. I think that is right-wing media propaganda. And the reason why I say that, black men have been the second largest voting bloc in the Democratic Party. So I believe that is a strategy to divide and conquer, something that politicians have done for years. Let's infiltrate their community. Let's create chaos and division so black men can sit at home.
You got it.
That's not, if you look at the numbers, It's bullshit.
Yes. I couldn't say it any better.
Can I curse, Kevin, or is that going to make y'all uncomfortable?
Well, I don't hold office, so.
I'm very comfortable with the truth. And you just spoke it. The numbers don't lie. And it is a narrative, and it's a narrative that is meant to divide. It's a narrative that is meant to create chaos. And it doesn't, it's designed fundamentally to take our collective eye off the ball,
Right.
Which is to unite around a strong candidate that is for all people, that wants to invest in all communities and make sure that we are consistent with our democratic ideals and our values. So there's no question here that it's a tactic.
Yeah, of course. But what I don't understand is how come Liz Cheney and her community don't be as loud as what they're saying about black men? Because when it comes to white women, in 2016, more white women voted for Donald Trump over Hillary Clinton. Then they turned around and doubled down on that in 2020, voting 50% for Donald Trump, even though it is not in their best interest. And let's talk about this year alone when it comes to women's rights. Mm-hmm. So how come Liz Cheney and these white women aren't stepping out there, calling out their own as loud as they're calling out black men?
Well, I can't speak for Liz Cheney or any other white woman for that matter. But what I can tell you is it is encouraging that she's out there, particularly given her politics historically, that she is willing to extend an olive branch to a party that she has long denounced because she sees the bigger picture. And hopefully a lot of Americans all across this country, millions of Americans, will see the bigger picture, that this is way beyond left-right politics. This is right versus wrong. Yeah. Do we care about integrity? Do we care about character? Do we care about decency? Do we care about love and compassion? Or do we not? And I think the more we can drive home the message, because I want to be careful not to start pointing fingers at folks when we have an opportunity right now over these next few days to just coalesce. We got one of the biggest coalitions, one of the most diverse coalitions in history. We're talking about from Liz Cheney to Bernie Sanders and AOC, everybody in between. Mm-hmm. You know, we're trying to come together now and get this done. So I hear you, but I think it's important to keep in mind that right now this coalition is diverse, and it's something that we have to continue to maximize the full potential of.
And I think, sorry to interrupt you, T, and I think everybody can't do everything. But we all have to do something. And so where, Liz, I think, did what she was supposed to do. And whether she whisper it in the chamber or echo it from the mountaintop, I think, like my good friend says, this coalition of Republicans and Democrats and independents coming together to say, what's the best thing for our country? It's first time in history. This is, I've never seen us come together like that.
Because democracy is literally on the ballot. Donald Trump is telling you in your face what he is going to do. And that Madison Square Garden rally should have been a wake-up call. But the reason why I'm so passionate about the women's perspective is because reproductive rights are on the ballot. And let me tell you something. As a woman myself and as a mother, as someone who has nieces that live in Texas, who has a goddaughter that lives in Louisiana, this idea that when I look at my comments, and I'm very vocal about protecting women's rights, I'm very passionate about it. You probably can see from being in this room. The comments I see makes me so upset. This idea that women have abortions because as a use of birth control is bullshit. That is such a misogynistic, sexist thing to think about when in terms of thinking about women's rights and reproductive. You can have in Texas a stillborn baby, a miscarriage, and can die because you cannot get the medical needs that you need right away. They will send you home because doctors are afraid to go to jail. So a lot of these women have to travel to other states. And by the time they get there, you don't know what can happen to them. So it's Absolutely. Like we have to take what he says seriously because he has proven in 2020, he has proven when he won in 2016, he stood on business for his people. The people that put him in office, he stood on business. What makes you think he's not going to stand on business when he gets in again?
And let me say on that point, listen, I hear you and I feel your passion and I share your passion. 50 years of precedent was Roe v. Wade. 50 years, nearly 50 years it was on the books. And just like that, it was rolled back. There's no other example quite like that, where you have a fundamental right that has been protected for decades and upheld as the law of the land that applies to half of the population, right, are women, and say, you know what? We're going to take that back now. We're going to take that back and we're going to give it to the states. And what's happened since? Over 20 states have now implemented laws to restrict access to this right. And fundamentally, let me say, I'm a man, and I can't speak to what it must be like to be a woman, but what I can speak to as a husband and as a father of 11-year-old twins, and as somebody who, along with my wife, struggled to have children and had to go through IVF. This is deeply personal for me too. And I understand the pain and the hurt that this puts upon our families, our women, our daughters, our nieces, and it's incumbent upon us as men to stand firm with you too.
And you know what makes me so upset? And I never shared this story, but I'm feeling compelled to share it right now. When I was 16 years old, a freshman in high school, and I've never shared this story on the radio before, I suffered a miscarriage. And thank God for Planned Parenthood, because I had nothing. My parents abandoned me and I had nothing. I didn't know who to go to, and I was terrified and I was afraid. And I didn't know who to talk to. And I went to a neighbor because I was feeling all of these pains in my stomach. And I was cramping and I was feeling so many pains. And she said, you need to go to the hospital. I went to the hospital and I watched my baby fall out of my bladder and at the size of the palm of my hand. I didn't know what a miscarriage was. I didn't know what any of that was. But if I didn't have Planned Parenthood, if I wasn't able to get the rest of the stuff taken out of my body, I could have died. And so when you think about, like, you know, when you think about the misogynistic and the sexist comments about women, it's heartbreaking to read that, and it sticks with me because I remember the next day having to go to the doctor and him having to suck out the remaining parts of the baby out of my body, and that white man saying to me, this is probably the best thing that could have happened to you because you would have just been a statistic. Tell me what my life would have been. And now you have these white men in power who are literally rolling back the protections of women that could save our lives if we need them. And that is heartbreaking to me. And I've never voted early in an election before, but I was so passionate about getting out there and exercising my right to vote and share and feel compelled to share my story on the radio today. I wrote it in my book that's going to come out, but I felt compelled to share it because that's how important it is. And for men to sit idle in this election and not think about their daughters who may have a moment in their lives that maybe they're not proud of, or maybe they have to make a decision in those moments, or have a niece or a goddaughter or a mother. Like, these are the things that are on the ballot. And these white, rich men don't give a damn about any of it. The Republican Party is not the Republican Party my mother and them grew up on. This is a different time, and people have to wake up and see and protect the women that they love in their lives. And that's why I'm so passionate about it.
As you should be.
And that
as we all should be.
Lieutenant Governor, that passion, and that's her story. But multiply that times 150,000. Multiply it by every young lady who might have made a wrong decision but had a right way with Planned Parenthood. You know what I mean? I can't. I'm raising 3 girls, Kayla, Gigi, and Vivi. And so not only do I want them to hear the pain at the young ages, 24, with 13 and 10, I want them to hear the pain of her story. And God, that I could protect them from it, but I can't protect them from it if I don't protect the vote, if I don't get out and put people in. And another thing, T, it was meant for you to share it. because we get in rooms and we sometimes try to let the room control who we really are. You can't control what's on the ballot right now. This is, I think about when my son, when he saw his first black superhero, Barack Obama.
Yeah.
I think about what it meant to him. Just imagine my daughter seeing the possibilities of a woman holding the president of the United States of America. And I think about my grandmother, who for the first time voted for Barack, and she said, "Can you believe there's a black man in the White House?" It was that simple to her. It wasn't anything else. And so these next 7 days, I think I know we're committed as men. And to an earlier point, do black men think, would they vote for Trump? I done seen black people do some dumb stuff in my life, you know what I mean? So now the narrative, so I'm sitting in Philadelphia, me, Michael Ealy, a couple other people, Rodney Pete, and we're having a conversation at a black-owned restaurant. And the first question that Bakari said, he said, how many of you guys thinking about voting for Trump? A room full of black people. Nobody raised their hand. So it is a narrative, but then he said, but we've been talking to people, and somebody said, Trump sent them a stimulus check. Somebody said, Trump is the ultimate entrepreneur because he had his name on. It's some people who think that small.
There is.
And so, to me, I'm reaching out to them. This is life or death. This is, I really feel that this country, with 4 years of Trump, and I don't want to say because all Republicans are not Trump.
No.
I think you have a guy who found a base of people who said racism and oppression is the way forward, and he's tapping into that.
But let's talk about that real quick, about the idea that Trump gave them all of this money. I want to just talk about how he failed black businesses during the pandemic. Okay, you have about 90% of black-owned small businesses that didn't get the help from Trump's first round of relief during the pandemic. By mid-2020, black-owned businesses were closing twice the rate of white-owned businesses, and black unemployment was the highest at over 14%.
So let me speak to this, because I was in Congress during that time when COVID hit us hard. I was in Congress. It was my second term in Congress in upstate New York, Hudson Valley, the Catskills, Southern Tier, by Binghamton. And we had to fight very hard to make sure after that first round of loans that it actually reached the communities who needed it the most. As we could imagine, when you already have built-in relationships with banks, when you already have a network that gives you access to capital, you are in a position to leverage the opportunity at a much faster rate than other communities. And so what ends up happening is the disproportionate realities get exacerbated as a result. And what you just detailed is an example of that. So you need somebody with a mindset in leadership that's cognizant of that fact, that cares about accounting for that fact rather than reinforcing that fact. And what you just spoke to is the fact that it was being reinforced. The disparities were being reinforced. And let's not just stop at black business and economics. How about lives?
Yeah.
How about the loss of life?
Yeah.
And how much we lost life? Because early on in that process, he was dismissive.
Yeah.
He was dismissive of the potency of this virus.
Why do you think people have this short-term memory? It's like, I remember when he got out of office, especially here in New York, people poured into the streets, cheering, happy, excited that they fired him. They fired him. The American people fired him from his job as president of the United States of America. How soon do we forget all of the bad things that were happening underneath his term? Right. When Joe Biden got in office, it felt like a great relief for American people. And when you talk about the economy, you have to look at what was handed to Joe Biden. You go from what Barack Obama did with the economy, how many jobs were given to people, how great the economy was, handed it over to Trump, how Joe Biden now has to climb out of Trump's economy on top of the pandemic. But they don't want to talk about is that the United States economy is growing at a faster rate than anybody's economy around the world.
Correct.
Around the world.
100%.
So listen, for me in this election, I'd rather pay a little bit more at the grocery store right now so that I can protect the freedom of women's rights. I'll pay a little bit more. I'll make that sacrifice. So the question is, what sacrifice are you willing to make? Because not every president is going to get it right.
And that all comes back to our values and principles. Again, you can be called a public servant. You can have the title of being a public servant. But what does it mean to genuinely serve the public? What does it mean to actually put the public before you, all people, before you and your individual interest? And that's what we have to ask ourselves, particularly those of us who historically have been marginalized and oppressed. Do you want somebody in office that has a mindset and a commitment level to serve everybody? Or do you want somebody who's purely transactional and only thinking about themselves and only really will pay you mind when he sees as if it's to his advantage?
Yeah.
If that's the dynamic, where do you think we're going to end up? How do we actually make progress if we have somebody in office who is self-centered in how he looks at power, who uses power as a brute force, right, and views it as his instrument to wield against the body politic, not to protect, not to enable communities, not to invest in people, but to ultimately say, I have it, what can I do with it for me and my people alone, period, full stop.
And
that's the dynamic.
And doing all that he can to dismiss the will of the people. Like, he did not want to certify the election the last time. He had an insurrection at the Capitol.
Yes, indeed.
A speech that he was giving and told them people to march down to the Capitol, defying the will of the people.
And has yet to acknowledge that he lost.
And still don't.
Facts.
Setting the groundwork now. Setting the groundwork now to confuse people about the election. Is so much misinformation. It's so much suppressing the press. Like, when I look at Project 2025 and I see what's happening with Jeff Bezos and the Washington Post and them not declaring a president, which is something that they have been doing for years. The LA Times, like, people are quitting their jobs because their voices are being suppressed. This is not something that is just happening this year. This is all intentional. You have Jeff Bezos, who is one of the richest men in the world, saying we're not going to do this. Based upon what? And people are not seeing that this is happening in real time.
And there's a lot of power in what you're saying right now, a lot. Because what you're also speaking to is what's going on in terms of people's faith in democracy. As you have more and more concentrated wealth funneling up into the hands of just a few, and those same actors can then turn around and control information, control what the public knows and understand and accepts. You go from a democracy to an oligarchy. That's what happens. And that's where we are in the midst of right now. If we, the people, if all of us out here don't open our eyes and engage and raise the bar on what it means to have real elected officials in office, you're giving your power to people to serve you.
Yeah.
So give that power over with care. Understand that you're handing that power over to somebody who's going to dictate your future, your children's future. So what's the standard we care about here? And I think what you just detailed and what you're putting your finger on right now gets to the heart of the matter. The more we have this economic inequality, the more folks are left behind, the more they lose faith that democracy can work for them in the first place. The district that I won in upstate New York, Trump won that same district in 2016. I flipped it in 2018 and held on to it in 2020 because I spoke directly to the people about these very issues: Republicans, independents, Democrats, 90% white district. Mm-hmm. The 8th most rural congressional seat in the entire country, 5,000 small family-owned farms. I'm not a farmer. I had a hip-hop album. I'm out there in that district talking to folks about these kinds of issues from the heart.
Yeah.
And I'm going to tell you right now, when you do that, that's that human capacity to love each other that can overcome a lot of this. The other side is we give in.
Yeah.
The other side is we get cynical.
Yeah.
We dismiss it all. We do moral equivalence, and we say, oh, it's all the same, but all equals the same. They don't care about us. No. Some folks do give a damn. And we got to figure out when it's time to actually invest in those people. And right now, we have a clear choice in what we can do moving forward.
Yeah.
I tell people it's to me, there's been no clear choice. I mean, and people say, well, we don't really know her. Well, there's not a lot of vice presidents until they're able to have their own agenda. How about this? A lot of people in New York don't know that your lieutenant governor is African American. I have to be honest with you. They think they didn't know, and because they're not paying attention.
And Cape Verdean and Latino.
Here's the thing. Here's the thing. I call that bullshit. Because here's why. When I hear things like, "Oh, we don't know her. Oh, she's this, she's that, that's misogyny and sexism at an all-time high. You want to know why I say that? It's because this Madam Vice President would not be Madam Vice President if she was not intelligent enough to climb up that goddamn scale. So for people to dismiss her is nothing but misogynistic behavior, in which we as women, especially women of color, have experienced probably in our entire lifetime working here in America. You can be so qualified for the job as a woman. You can have all the accolades, all the degrees, all the experience, and they will still say, I don't know if she's good enough for the job. Show me more. Meanwhile, you got an incompetent, more things I could say than I won't say on this radio, who gets applauded and laughed and, oh, it's a fun, ha, ha, ha. And if she says and does the things that are remotely close to what he says, she is scrutinized from head to toe.
I think Van Jones said it best. He can be lawless, but she has to be flawless.
I heard that.
It's
true. And it's sad.
And it's sad. But how many women in those C-suites have experienced that? How many of us have experienced that?
I think all of them. I think if growing in America, being African American, Latino, person of color, everything that you're saying, we've experienced it. You know what I mean? I always joked around in the music business after 40 years, if I was white, if I did what I did, and I was white, and so I think that's our fight. We're going to continue to fight. The most important thing is that we don't allow our ignorance to have us sit on the fence. We don't or sit on a bench because when we do vote, we change things. We've lost elections in Florida, 5,000 votes. In another place, it was 20-something thousand votes. When we do get out and vote, if you activate that passion that you have every single day and every time you're on the air, if Lieutenant Governor continues to activate what he's done all over New York and all over this country, if I continue to activate hip-hop and we actually go out and do what we're supposed to do, we will elect the first African-American female president.
And you have to close the noise out and show them better than you can tell them.
Right.
Show them better than you could tell them.
100%. And I just want to say, particularly on the need to stay united. Again, having served in a district that was 90% white and experienced some of the poorest counties in the state of New York, and I see the economic inequality growing and people living check to check, trying to get by, just trying to make ends meet. We are at a moment here where we need everybody, all hands on deck, because a lot of folks are hurting. And we have to be in a position now where we understand that struggle right now is more collective than ever. It truly is. And yes, we have historical narratives that get tied to different communities at different points in time and that still live with us in the present day. But the moment we don't see the collective dynamic, the collective pain that is ongoing right now, the status quo gets the advantage. Because then within that collective pain, we're not sharing our experience. We're not leveraging our collective power. Mm-hmm. And the other side continues to sustain itself as a result. So I just want to make it clear, to all of us out there who understand right now the stakes, who are hurting in different ways, who have been neglected and overlooked or marginalized or scapegoated or fear-mongered, wherever it is you want to call, but we've all gone through it. This is a moment to stand up together. This is a moment to stand up and say, not anymore. We're going to turn the page on this. We're going to march forward. We're not going to agree on every single issue, but we are going to agree on what's a fact and what's not a fact. We're going to agree on truth. We're going to agree on love. We're going to agree on unity and compassion and thoughtfulness. And we're going to reject cruelty and ugliness and darkness and hate and divisiveness, because that's not how progress gets made.
Yeah. November 5th, everybody, I want to remind you, get out there, exercise your right to vote. Early voting is happening now in New York through November 3rd, okay? So if you're listening to us on the radio or watching us on YouTube, just remember, if you live in the state of New York, you can go right now and vote early. Lieutenant Governor, well, just one last thing. So explain kind of your role, because Governor Kathy Hochul was the lieutenant governor prior to homeboy leaving office or getting kicked out, however you want to explain it, being fired from the job. And then she moved up as the governor. So that's kind of what happens with you, right? Like you know.
So yeah, I am number 2 in the state, just like a vice president in many respects to a president, if God forbid something were to happen. But at the same time, in terms of day-to-day life, I preside over the state senate. That is one of the obligations that I have. And then not more importantly, but as important, I travel the state and I engage with communities all over the state. From down in the city, up to North Country, out to Buffalo, and everybody in between. I have a portfolio that I focus on that's based on hate and bias prevention. That's also focused on service and civic engagement. Those are 2 of the big things, as well as economic development. So every lieutenant governor is a little bit different in terms of what experience they come in with. I served in Congress, too, which is unique in the sense that I served and was able to be successful getting 18 bills signed into law, helping farmers, helping our veterans, helping small business owners. So I bring a wealth of experience in with that, as well as some relationships that I have from folks in Congress, like Hakeem Jeffries, who we're going to be working very hard to make the next Speaker of the House.
I was going to ask you. I was going to ask you about that, because one thing I noticed at Madison Square Garden is when Trump was talking about the current Speaker of the House, who, by the way, before he was a speaker, encouraged Republicans not to certify the elections. I don't know if people know that, but he was very vocal and trying to convince Mike Pence at the time not to certify the election. But what stuck out to me the most in all of that rhetoric that was being spewed is when Trump looked to the Speaker of the House and said, me and him got this little secret thing going. That made me nervous, because we all know how apprehensive he was before. And he wasn't even Speaker of the House to certify the election. Can you explain? Because I always tell people Congress is so important. That's why it's so important when you vote down the ballot. Because Congress controls a lot of the things, if not all the things, that need to get passed, and including the funding as well,
Power of the purse.
The power of the purse. What can happen if Madam VP, when she wins, if they don't certify the elections? Like, what power do they have?
Well, first, let me just say, there's certain things that our founders could not have fully envisioned. It's kind of assumed to some degree, for being candid here, that there would be good faith actors in separate enough positions with the separation of powers that there'd be a check on the system at all times. And what Trump is testing in ways that have not been tested in our country's history is how far he can reach down to our state legislative bodies as well, to the secretaries of state that oversee the way elections are had. You saw what we tried to do in Georgia when he got on the phone and said, can you find me, X amount of votes? Had Pence decided to do what Trump wanted him to do, that would have been an unprecedented dynamic that we would have had to try to figure out in real time. Mm-hmm. There would have been no precedent for what one does in that situation. Otherwise, we would have some legal basis to know how to proceed. We know, and Pence knew in that moment, what was constitutional.
Yeah.
Right? And you had the Supreme Court ultimately that is meant to overlook these things as well. But we also have a challenge now with regard to what Trump and all presidents moving forward are protected from with immunity, right?
And by the way, that's Trump's Supreme Court.
It is. These are his justices that he put on there, the same ones who overturned Roe v. Wade.
Yeah.
So what you're seeing here is certainly an undermining of our democratic principles. But let's just be clear. And this is why it's so important that we win the House. Because as long as we can win the House, and we here in New York have a chance to do that. We have 5 congressional seats, 3 of which Biden actually won, but are still being held by Republican representatives. And they're all freshmen, first-year representatives. We can flip those seats. There's 2 on Long Island, New York 1, New York 4. There's 1 out in Syracuse, New York 22. There's a couple in my backyard, New York 17 with Mondaire Jones and Lawler, and New York 19 with Josh Riley versus Mark Molinaro. Josh Riley, Pat Ryan in New York 18. These are all critical seats that we have to flip. And if we flip these seats, we make Hakeem Jeffries the Speaker of the House. And to your point about the power of the House.
I love Hakeem, by the way.
Me too.
Yeah, he's a great guy.
He's been somebody who's been on the front lines for a long time, displaying what it means to lead with principled leadership. And with him as the Speaker of the House, we have a backstop. We have a strong backstop in terms of how much Trump would be able to try to get away with. There's a reason why the founders had branches of government, co-equal branches of the government, right? And so as long as we are able to maintain control of one of those branches, and certainly the House, I think, is one that we can control if we do what we can do here in New York. We're not a battleground state, but we have battleground districts that we need to flip.
Very important.
Very important.
Very, very important. Thank you so much, Lieutenant Governor.
Thank you.
Everybody, Antonio Delgado is here. Remember, vote down the ballot. Early voting is happening now through November 3rd here in New York. And, of course, election night is on November 5th. Kevin,
yes,
I want to talk to you. I want to move away from politics just a little bit. I know it's heavy on politics, but that was a lot of information we really needed to get out there.
That was great.
And normally I have these discussions on my podcast. Because, radio is different now. You got this amount of time to say a whole bunch of stuff. And on podcasts, we could do a lot more. And shout out to everybody that listens to my podcast and watches it on YouTube. So, Kevin, congratulations on your career shift. You've decided to step away from the company you helped build, 300 Entertainment, which, by the way, sold to Atlantic for a lot of money. So let me hold something.
Let's talk about it.
You're gonna buy me lunch later. But you decided to pass the baton to Raina Bass. Shout out to Raina, who's an incredible Black woman, by the way, now running the company, and Salim, who is her partner. Why, at this point in your career, did you decide to step away?
I think when you have a 10-year-old baby, but that 10-year-old is acting like a 20-year-old because the people you've helped build and raise in a company are adult enough to actually foster what that vision that you had. You find a way, you nurture a way, and you know how to get out of the way. And I've always done this in my whole career. If I feel like this can be done, because I'm not done. The job's never done with me, because I want to make more multimillionaires. I want to build more brands. And so I think it's important that was a moment in time. I'm very supportive. I want them to be great. I love all the artists. But God's calling me to do something bigger.
And what is that?
So,
are you going to do it again?
We'll talk about that. but I didn't retire. I'm not just playing golf all day.
Because, that was a tough week for you. You was trending all over social media because that was the week that Puff had gotten arrested. Mm-hmm. That was also the week that every CEO resigned in the music industry. So they kind of lumped you in. And then I saw on TikTok, it was all these conspiracy theories. And because I knew you, I kind of took it personal. And I'm like, what are y'all talking about? It was just happened to be the timing there. So, like, can you just shut down all the conspiracy rumors and all of that bull? I know you don't buy into it.
No, there's no rumors. If I said it, I said it. If I did it, I did it. People know me. I stand on mine. And at the end of the day, I have friends that have made good decisions, bad decisions, and they have families and all these things are going. But to lump what this CEO did and this CEO did to put me in that, all I did was serve the culture for the last 40 years. And that's all I ever will do. And I want to say that every choice that I make going forward is going to be a choice for the people, a choice to create the next form of executive, to give the next opportunities. You know, I remember, and you love this, I remember when I decided to sell the company, I said to myself, what does my executive team look like? 50% women, 50% people of color. How many multimillionaires I'm gonna make by doing this? 62%. You know, I look at these things. So now, as the next generation, and all the noise you can talk, but look at the record. Look what I've been able to do with some great partners. And my next thing will probably be my greatest thing. Remember when I was president of Def Jam and we did all the stuff, Fat Farm, Baby Fat, and all this, and so everybody thought, what else can you do? Then we came and took the Warner Music Group private in public. Oh, what else can you do? Then we did 300, 8 years old, and sold that for more money than we sold Def Jam for. So I know there's a higher calling, and I want to work at it with my partners.
One thing that I always loved about you from the executive standpoint, you always was a good servant. You always served not only your staff, but the needs of the artists. You were always an artist and culture first type of executive. I admire that so much about you, just watching how you moved in the business. Why was that important for you to be that? Because there are some labels and executives now, even back then, if the artist wasn't making a substantial amount of money in the beginning or over time, you're out of here. Like, it was all about the bottom dollar. But you always loved the culture so much. You stuck with a lot of artists that didn't make you some money that you could have dropped, but you stuck with them. Mm-hmm. Why was that important for you?
I think, like the lieutenant governor, I'm cut from the very cloth, and I walk the walk. I was an artist.
Yeah.
So we're gonna get back to the rap album. I was an artist. So you can't tell me how an artist is supposed to feel. You can't tell me how an artist shouldn't feel. You can't tell me that we're the only business that you don't have to have a certain amount of capital, that you don't have to have a certain amount of training, and we've created more multimillionaires in our culture. So when I sit back, I look at these last 40 years and celebrating the 50 years of hip hop, I'm looking at not artists, I'm looking at men and women who are going to serve our country. I'm looking at men and women from our culture that now are taking on lieutenant governor jobs, presidential jobs, district attorney jobs. And so I know now is the time. So now if the influence can not just be about culture, it could be about all people. And I heard exactly what you said, because I had a 2-hour conversation with one of my Republican friends that he wasn't trying to convince me and I wasn't trying to convince him. We were just putting the facts on the table. And at the end of it, he picked up and called his wife. He said, we got some things to talk about as a family. Because I heard the facts from a different side. And so to me, I just think it's responsibility to do everything that I can for our culture, everything that I can for our elected officials. Him and I spoke when we first met. It's not just about electing, it's also holding people accountable.
Yeah,
too.
That's right.
That is the key, because when we elect Kamala, we're going to hold her accountable. And when we elect whatever the next governor or lieutenant governor or mayor, we're going to hold them accountable, because we're now 50 years old.
Exactly.
We're not kids anymore. We're not kids anymore.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And this is the last thing I say. This hurts so. It's personal to me, because I remember the whole stop and frisk thing. I remember I'm just named the president of Def Jam, and I'm in L.A. Redman's with me. A guy is in the back, and I'm driving. I'm saying, "Yo, this don't feel right. I think somebody followed me." The next thing I knew, I'm laid out on Sunset Boulevard. They blocked everything, laid out like this, with a gun back in my head.
Wow.
So you can't tell me. I know you elect the wrong person. You elect the wrong president. You elect the wrong mayor, the wrong governor. It's real, especially being a black man.
And Trump has been so vocal about giving police full immunity. Full immunity. No one, not even the president, should have that type of status. So that means you're saying go commit all the crimes you can and you're going to be okay. You're going to have full immunity? That's dangerous to give anyone.
But they don't even need immunity, and they did it. And so just imagine if they had immunity.
I do feel like the industry is shifting and there is opportunity for more independent labels to come in and do what you did at 300. And I feel like it is a culture that right now, while folks are just looking at streaming numbers and the analytics, there is a space for an independent company to come in and build from the ground up.
It's a $9 billion business, the independent space. And the more educated we get, the more capital we get. Getting back to Kamala giving these grants and for giving these loans, it puts us in a place. We're first generation money in most cases. And I'm talking entertainment, football, basketball.
Yeah, that's true.
It's
a lot of people don't
first generation
look
money.
at that.
And but now, if you look at what people are doing, what's my man in Boston? He said he wants to create Black Wall Street. Jaylen Brown, I think his name.
Yeah, from the Celtics.
Celtics, yeah. Look at what Magic has been able to build over the course of his career. Look at what LeBron has been able to do with education. Now we're put these pillars down that kids are going to change. They don't want to just go to school to be employed.
No, they don't. My son actually sent me a video the other day and told me school is teaching me how to work on an assembly line. I don't want to do that. That's what my son said. I said, well, what do you want to be?
That's the hip-hop
I'm going to make money. I said, yes, that's great. I'm not shutting that down, but you still have to have a plan on how to get there. And you still have to have the tools and the knowledge and the infrastructure and the resources to get there.
And I just want to say to Brother Kevin, like what he represents, and you put your finger on it with the 50 years. You know, when I was an artist after law school, that was my vision. I saw in the culture where we are and where we could go, and how we could leverage the wealth accumulation and with it the power and the respect that it garners in our society. And we have approached that point as a culture where it is incumbent upon us, and I just can't applaud you enough for being an example of this, where we need to lean into that power now. Mm-hmm. We need to be very intentional with it. We've built something very special, and it certainly has the power to entertain the world. There's no question about that. We've proven that twice over and then some. The question is, can we use it to transform hearts and minds and bring justice to the world? And I think there's another level we can go to. And I think it will have to be about leveraging not just political power, but economic power and all other kinds of powers.
And sometimes the culture just needs to grow the fuck up so that we can do those type of things, because we can't stay the same. And I see it a lot. And I'm just like, yo, we just got to grow the fuck up.
But we also need the folks who've been out there on the front lines doing this with the experience and the expertise and the know-how to also grab the bull by the horns. Exactly.
Yeah.
Take and say, no, let's go. Let's go in this direction. Let's build, and let's coalition build. Let's figure out how to cooperate and how to leverage what we have collectively.
And nobody but Kevin can do that. Clarence is not here anymore. Nobody but you. I know a lot of people tell you that and they throw that on you. And I know that's a heavy thing to weigh, but you're the only one that can collectively do that.
I want all the smoke.
There you go.
I want all the smoke.
Speaking of smoke, because I'm told I got 5 minutes. So speaking of smoke, the rumor on the internet is that there's going to be a mistrial in a Young Thug case. I don't know that to be true, and I don't want to get too deep into the Young Thug case with you because I know this will be on the Fed's internet, and I know they will comb through every interview ever done if you get called to testify or have to speak in regards to Young Thug. But simplify everything that's going on. I know there have been three judges now on the case. There has been more toss and turns than an episode of Power or BMF. But can you simplify what's been going on with Thug and how has he been doing?
I'll simplify it because I am testifying in the next 2 to 3 months, and I can't really talk about the case. But what I can say is that our culture is under attack. We're the only culture where our creativity is being criminalized. Here's a guy who decided to change his neighborhood, decided to give back, decided to be a beacon of light to his community. And then he went on to say, hey, I'm going to employ other people, and I need you guys to do the right thing. So he sits there for 2.5 years because of lyrics and because of where he grew up. He sits there with 6 children, a mom, a family, a community that needs him. And I just pray for them every single day because we keep thinking they just artists. They're real human beings, also. He had to didn't have the opportunity to bury one of his most up-and-coming artists in Lil Keed. He had to live with that in the cell every single day. So I wish his family's the best, free Thug. There's a lot of us working hard on it. There's so many artists that have suffered from this. Mac Phipps spent 20-something years in jail based off of lyrics. So we got a lot of work to do, and part of my policy work and political work, but also my personal work will be dedicated to the responsibility of the next 50 years of hip-hop. And it's why I needed the freedom to be able to announce something else I'm going to announce in probably 2 months. I got to be able to do me, and so I can't be controlled by the laws and the rules of a corporation.
Can I ask you something separately? And
you can ask me anyway, so it doesn't matter.
and listen, and it's fair if you don't want to answer this, because I want to make sure I ask this in a way, because I know you have to testify. I don't want them to take anything out of context. But if an artist is out there committing crimes and violating the law, do you feel like they should be held accountable for that?
If a human being is out there, I mean, I'm for law enforcement, but what I'm not for is targeted law enforcement to take down a culture because we're the #1 most consumed music. So the bills that we're passing are not bills to say, hey, I wrote a record that said I shot a man at 2 o'clock and robbed the grocery store, and then the next day at 2 o'clock a man was shot and the store was robbed. No, you can use that. But you can't use when somebody, just because he says I'm King Slime, and you say he's the leader of a gang.
No,
That's the
and
difference.
I get that, because a lot of the music that's put out there is storytelling. It's other writers on it. You don't even know who all the writers be on these records sometimes. But I see what's happening with Lil Durk and a lot of these artists, and I've always said, and I've been very vocal on my podcast and on the show, is that you can't have it both ways. You can't be a superstar artist and still be a street gangster. At some point, there has to be a level of transition, but I understand there is transition that needs to be that happens, because.
But we all come from the streets. I think it's an excuse. I think it's an excuse, though.
But nobody wakes up and says, I'm just gonna gang bang today. This is me. I'm born into this world to shoot, kill, rob, steal. Sometimes environments create, poverty breeds a lot of violence. That's what people don't understand. When you come from certain communities, it becomes no choice. When you're making, what is the minimum wage in America now? $7 an hour, and you have
$7.25,
yeah, like in some states, $7 an hour. You know what I mean? And the poverty line is so poor. And the job market is so bad. What are
you speaking to my heart?
What are they committed to do?
I just got to say this on that point, because putting individuals aside, artists aside, the conditions part that you're speaking about, the normalization of death and destruction born of those conditions, that is a persistent pain that has yet to be fully accounted for in our society. And so there's no question that we have to hold people accountable for their actions. But when will we get to a point where we hold ourselves accountable as a society for what we are allowing our children to be born into generation after generation, knowing what the outcomes are likely to be?
You can't listen. I'm the guy now that says, at 16 in Baltimore, you're supposed to be dead on drugs or in jail. I'm 56, so there's a way.
Yes.
There's a choice that you make. And my G's said to me, "No, young, you do this." We're gonna make. And so I say to all of you guys who I think you're not just artists, you're future fathers, your future leaders of its community. The choices you make is a generational choice when you choose wrong. Mm-hmm. When you choose right, or you choose to even walk down that path and defy what the odds say, the glory of God at that moment in time is a light so bright that it cannot be dimmed. And so I believe the more we allow people to and show them and be the example and continue to have the lieutenant governor come out and be places, continue to go out and where they don't think that we should be. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And that's what I'm doing. And I'm gonna go back to the street and tell them, we got to do this, and we got to. But everybody has a choice to make, and I think it's an excuse to say, because of this is where I come from, this is where I'm gonna end up.
Yeah, never should be an excuse.
No, and when you're given opportunity, you got to take that opportunity, and you got to not turn back. You can't have
not an excuse, but let's not also
dismiss it.
Oh
no,
that's what I'm saying.
We come from it
exactly. but to the point where we'd have to start trying to solve for it, and not us. I mean, the powers, the people, myself included, folks who have the ability, who have the wherewithal, who have been put in a position to serve. There needs to be more focus on what we're doing to help solve these realities, because it's a jungle, and the way people navigate and how they navigate, the good fortune that they have. You can be exceptional. A lot of things that can put you in a certain path that's amazing. But as a society, as a baseline question, we have to ask ourselves, what are we okay with being the floor?
Yeah.
Like, what is the floor we're okay with, right? As a society?
Right.
And then, of course, again, individual accountability, responsibility, all that 100%. But that we need to be able to do both those things at once and try to correct for both.
And they can. And they can coincide. You can do both at once. And I don't think it needs to be an either or.
No.
So Kevin Liles and Lieutenant Governor Antonio Delgado, New York Lieutenant Governor Antonio Delgado, thank you so much for tapping in with me. It's Tapping with TT Everybody in early voting. It's happening now in New York through November 3rd, and November 5th is Election Day. Guys, thank you so much for coming in and having this healthy conversation and getting me to cry and mess up my makeup. I appreciate that.
Don't put that on me.
Y'all know I'm too gangster to be crying.
But by the way, crying is gangster.
There you go.
I know.
I'm okay with that.
Yeah, because Kevin cries all the time.
Yeah, of course,
At the drop of a dime, Kevin crying.
Of course. I'm okay.
It's Tapping with TT, everybody. It's High 97. Thank you so much for tapping in.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.